Hey guys, welcome to the coach here today for this Heritage Week talk. It's part of our sort of fairly extensive Heritage Week program that we have on this year. And today we're talking about one of the biggest events in Irish history, really, and its effect on the railway system of the northwest of Ireland. We're talking about partition. It's especially apt, I think, to be talking about this at this time. We're currently in the 100-year anniversary of the Boundary Commission, which was established to kind of redraw the boundary that was set in 1921, but which was effectively thrown out after the unfavourable terms were revealed, particularly as that affected East Donegal and its return into its capture by the Northern Irish side. The first sort of order of the day is that we're launching our new booklet, Railway Connections, which is a little publication that was put together between ourselves and the Foyle Valley Railway Museum as part of a Shared Island Civic Society Fund grant for a project called Railway Connections that we held just this past year. There was a 2-day event starting in Derry, and then the next day was in Donegal town here, where we brought together modellers, historians and communities, bringing the people together basically to discuss our railway heritage and sort of around that theme of the lost connections between border regions and rural communities. I wanted to take a very short reading from one of the entries in Railway Connections, just to kind of give you a sense of what some of the stories are like. Some are very touching, some very informative, and some are pretty funny. So I just wanted to read one entry, a short one, that we got from Ken Ewing, who's a member of the museum here. And he's talking about smuggling along the border. He says, there were 2 women, Mary and Annie, who wore these big, long, loose bloomers. They were in Strabane one day and they did a bit of shopping. And they were very much aware that the train would be stopped for a customs check. So Mary had the butter stuffed down her bloomers, and Annie had the loose tea stuffed down hers. They were praying that the train wouldn't be stopped at Lifford, but lo and behold, they stopped at Lifford, and the customs came on and the 2 of them were shaken. But it so happened they didn't search them. They went on their way, and Mary says, "Oh gosh, the butter's melted." To which Annie responded, "And I have the tea wet." So there's a few fun ones like that in there, some a bit more on the informative side and some in the more kind of park of the Foyle Valley Railway Museum. To say a few words about that project, he was involved for longer than I was in it.
Hello. Can you press a button now?
No, all right.
That's okay. Hello, you're all very welcome, and a beautiful day like this here. As Marty was saying, we came together, so we did, the museums came together and we did a 2-day event. Logistics of it were, Mark will tell you, nearly impossible. So they were, but the 2 events were really well, there was a lot of people that came to them, and we got a lot of stories, a lot of background stories and all, people's experiences on the railways, the Donegal, the GNR. They were very much family orientated. So they were the railways, because it was always mothers, fathers, uncles, brothers, cousins, sons, daughters. Everybody worked on the railways. So they became a family thing. And I suppose one of the things, when the railways closed, it cut off a lot of remote communities again. So it did, because they automatically thought that the buses were going to take over, and but it really did cut off these communities. But as I say, our event, we're always kind of striving. Like we have ourselves, and we've Donegal, we've Castle Railway Museum, we've Whitehead, we've got Downpatrick, and we're kind of trying to connect all our museums together, because I think we've sort of one ultimate goal, and that's to preserve the history of the railways and to pass it on to our younger generations, So that's more or less where we're at now. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. So everybody here will find a copy of the Railway Connections booklet there. If there's not one on your seat, then you've chosen to sit further down the back. But we'll get you one sorted. The next order of business, this is the kind of main event of the day, is we're delighted to have railway historian Jim McBride in to talk on the same topic. We're going to talk about partition and its effect on the railways, and its effect particularly on their closures. Now, Jim is a long-time member of the museum, board member, and a good friend of ours. You will know him from some of the books that he's published, maybe the most recent being Strabane's Railways Remembered, which is also quite relevant to what we're talking about today, and it's available for sale in the shop there. So without any further ado, please welcome Jim McBride.
Good afternoon. It's such a nice day here that we're in.
Just leave the ship around there.
Such a nice day. We're in danger of falling asleep, including me. Now, I'm a lifelong historian. I remember this place 30 years ago when this museum was first founded in 1995, and this place has come a long way since. Our Fintown was first founded 30 years ago as well too, on 1995. And like 60 odd years since the railways of Donegal closed down completely in 1960. We're looking today at the partition and the impact of railways. And in 1925, the Boundary Commission made its final report. But at that stage, Belfast and London were exhausted from World War I and no interest redrawing the boundary. Dublin was exhausted in the aftermath of the Civil War, which destroyed Irish society and this part of Ireland. And what happened was that the railways, they cut railways off in their hinterland, and I'm going to look really at the northwest and also look at some other relevant examples across the island and how the railways of Ireland were killed off, particularly in Donegal, by politics and by religion to a certain extent. Okay, so what we have here is the map of the northwest of Ireland, okay? And how this border was drawn across it. That's divided us ever since 1922, when the partition came into effect in the aftermath of the treaty in December 1921. And it wasn't an easy physical boundary like a river in many cases. It was a townland boundary, it was a hedge, it was a stream. People didn't know which side of the border they were on. And people had to go about creating the border. And we look what's happened, like say, with Russia and Ukraine, a similar thing happened here to a certain extent. What you have on the right hand side is the customs men in Strabane, the guys in the white hat, to make sure there was no contraband being smuggled both ways. For example, during World War II in the north, a thing called the emergency here, goods were short to supply in the north, but were easy to get in Donegal, so customs trade went that way. Other stuff were banned in what was called the Free State, and trade went the other way. And the customs men checked every passenger, the Donegal rail car in Strabane, and you see land for goods traffic as well. Okay, so what you have is the geographical boundary, okay, and the right hand side. So how did they create these customs posts? What was called the Irish Free State. They broke away from British rule to Ulster or Northern Ireland. Okay, and these little wooden sticks appeared in the ground right across Ireland, particularly in the border between like Donegal and Derry, Donegal and Tyrone, Fermanagh, and you see the map yourself. And you see Donegal is today still the most cut off part of Ireland. That little narrow strip of land around Ballyshannon, where I'm on Tuesday night doing a talk on the railways of Ballyshannon and their history and heritage. And to this day, those 6 counties along the border have no railways whatsoever. So railway desert in the northwest of Ireland. That's a legacy of partition and the political effects here. When the anti-rail policy of Stormont closed railways down, we'll look at the northwest in particular. And it ties in with the Railway Connections book very well, particularly around Derry and Strabane, where partition had its biggest effects on the railways. Okay, but the first railways in Ireland date back to 1834. The Dublin and Kingstown Railway, which is now Kingstown became Dún Laoghaire after independence in 1822, when the Irish Free State broke away. And that railway today is now part of the Dart network, and so is railway line in Ireland, and you still travel on it. You hear everything okay at the back, guys?
Yeah,
I'm just checking.
To hear exactly what you're saying.
Okay, sorry.
I have
Yeah.
an interest.
Okay.
Sorry for disturbing you.
All right. I'm very accommodating. Here's a railway map of Ireland in 1920 at its fullest extent, because one of the first lines that closed to the partition was the line between Keady and Castleblaney, which closed in 1923. It's a direct result of partition. Because suddenly that line had no traffic. Because suddenly Keady is in the north, and Castleblaney was in the Free State, and that railway closed down. And here in Donegal, we had 225 miles of railway of the narrow gauge network. Lough Swilly is nearly 100 miles, and it's just as important as Donegal and the County Donegal Railways Joint Committee of 125 miles network. And suddenly, they find themselves like in Derry, Lough Swilly, 95 miles Donegal, 4.5 miles in the north. Suddenly, the whole railway is cut off in its natural hinterland. And here too, with Lifford was a county town of Donegal, and across the border, half a mile away, was Strabane. And suddenly it was in a different country. And whole economic demographics changed overnight. People lived in one country and worked in another, and vice versa. You live across a river and see the River Foyle and see a different country. Do you want to change it?
Check it now.
Okay, right now. So on the left hand side is a simplified map of Ireland. On the right hand side is from the west side I run to Shoe Stations. It's a map of Derry and Strabane. Okay? And you see, Derry and Strabane were very unusual. They had two different railway lines. One of the very rare cases in Ireland where two different railway companies served the same places. One ran on the east bank of the Foyle, that was the Great Northern Railway, that was 5'3" gauge. You get from Foyle Road Station in Derry, which was a city centre station, to Dublin, you know, in less than 4 hours, a dining car. Really, it's only a tea car these days. Right hand side is the narrow gauge line, which actually belonged to the Midland Railway, as well as the Donegal Railway, from Derry to Strabane. That ran through County Tyrone, through new buildings in Dunamana, etc. And that was unusual. And that was the only place in Ireland where two places were served by two different railway companies on two different gauges, just to add to the complexity. And right down is a little red line, and that was it came the international boundary after 1922. I ran through the River Foyle. In Strabane there were two islands at the mouth of Strabane. One was in the north, and the other island was in the south. So that's the way partition worked. It became a demographics is where the maps were, and where the maps accurate. Okay, the city of Derry is a case study. Okay, top left is the Donegal station, Victoria Road. That's the red and cream livery of Donegal. That line was always steam operated because the Donegal never owned the railway, just between Victoria Road and Strabane. Belonged to the Northern Counties Committee. And it was always railway steam operated to the very closure in 1954, December 54. Top right was the Foyle Road Station of the Great Northern Railway. Opened as far as Derry in 1847, extended to Foyle Road in 1850. And it was the main line terminus. Today it's a car park in Derry. You wouldn't even know the station had been there. Bottom left was the worst station in Derry, Graven Dock, it's a Lough Swilly. You went there and got the train to Burtonport. And it took 5.5 hours to 6 hours, just depending what sort of mood they were in, how many drinks breaks it took. The bottom right is the Waterside Station. It's been recently restored and reopened. It's the only railway station left in Derry, and you get trains to Belfast and Coleraine from there. And there's the map. Four terminuses. Two at each side of the river. One 3-foot gauge, one 5'3". Connected with the Port and Harbour Commissioners line, which were mixed gauge. Totally unique in Ireland. That's why Derry's the only double deck bridge anywhere in Ireland. Because the top deck's for road traffic, bottom deck's for train traffic. But the wagons were winched across. It was too light for locomotives to go across. They were just winched across. But I won't bore you with the details. Okay, Donegal Station. That poster we banned in the shop. We have it for sale. And there's Victoria Road. That's number 1 Alice, number 8 Foyle. Both of them were scrapped. We're actually quite lucky. Only half the inches of Donegal that existed in the 1950s were actually scrapped. That's because they were withdrawn by 55. Okay? Although the route to Strabane was in Northern Ireland, the TDR network was not. So the Donegal line from Strabane to Derry was completely in Northern Ireland. So for example, during World War II, or the emergency here, they had to get off goods right from Omagh, the military base there, to Derry. Because the major military and naval base during World War II. They couldn't take on the Great Northern Railway because that ran through a different country. And they couldn't take on the NCC because it was 3-foot gauge. So it's actually all about converting it to 5'3", but it never happened. Okay? Graven Dock. Here we're at Derry. Go along Sir Strand Road. That's the only building still left, that photograph. Top left. Okay? The bottom Bottom left photograph is now the car park at Sainsbury's in Derry, and there's McDonald's there too. And there's an original map from the time, and now Lough Swilly Remembered towards Buncrana. Because the partition line from Buncrana to Cardona closed this area in 1935 because of the impact of partition. But remarkably, every single station building is still there between Buncrana and Cardona. Remarkably, 90 years later. Okay, then the line went through towards Letterkenny. Now that's been built over a good bit, but a lot of station buildings are still there. We have a railway heritage map as well in the museum, which you can get after the talk. Okay. The Swilly had the comes at Bridge End, 4.5 miles from Derry city centre. Today, it's just part of the Derry conurbation. You wouldn't know there'd been a railway there. That level crossing barrier is still there, hidden amongst hedges. There's the customs, there's the post-iron bus van, wait to collect the border, the mail from across the border, to sell to Civic to Donegal. Bottom right, top right, you see the customs sheds to the right of the steam engine. There's the OS map, okay? The yellow bed's the border, okay? So Bridgend was just literally over the border inside the Irish Free State in Donegal. The Swilly kept everything immaculate at the very end. Quite remarkable. This is really spotlessly. Colour photographs are very rare. And we know 3 examples of film footage of the Lough Swilly in existence, and I've got them. Because the Swilly went in 1953. They decided to keep trains running and switch things to the buses. They were steam railway operated to the very end and switched over to their bus network and road freight network. The Donegal took a different course. Tubing Junction. It's the first customs post anywhere in Ireland, by the way, was Tubing Junction. There was no road access to it. You had to cross that stream to get to the station because it was transfer only. So that became the first customs post anywhere in Ireland was Tubing Junction. But then Tubing Junction.
T-O-O-M-I-N.
Yep, and that signal's been recently, a guy called John McGuigan has recently restored it at Tubing Junction. Because 10 years ago that was just completely, you couldn't get near it because it was completely overgrown. You needed like a industrial hedge trimmer or something near it. And that's a transfer point between the Buncrana line and the line to Burtonport and Letterkenny. And the signalman had to walk through the stream to get to work, or the track. By 1938, traffic had fallen off so much, all cars were moved to Bridge End because traffic went so much, it dropped by 50% in the Lough Swilly. So that's the first of the cross-border railways. Let's go on to the next cross-border, the Great Northern Line. Okay, the line ran from Strabane to Derry, was opened as early as 1847, designed by Robert Stevenson. Okay, and until 1921, it ran through one country. Suddenly, it found itself at Port Hall. When it crossed the Foyle, it was crossing became the Irish Free State, and all the stations became part of the Irish Free State. So the line had 3: Strabane, the north, Carrigan's, Port Hall, Johnson, all in the Free State, then back to Derry in the north. Right? A crazy, a nurse person, every single one of the stations is there. Carrigan's, Port Hall, St Johnson. The customs post at Carrigan was built as late as in 1928. It's there in the photograph. St Johnson, note the guys with the white hats. That's the customs guys, because Carrigan was a small station. Not every train served it. And in Port Hall, which the station remains are still there if you know where to look. So you got the train. So what happened to GNR was you just ran trains non-stop from Strabane to Derry, because that way you didn't have to get customs checks done. You ran a local service, and that just fell off the map. And then before partition, it was about 10 trains a day between Derry and Strabane. In the 1950s, it was down to 3 or 4, with more on a Saturday. And the goods traffic had to be sealed off, so it didn't go through the Irish Free State, or was just sealed, So it was a complicated situation. Okay, Strabane was even worse. There's Strabane. The Donegal had 3 lines in the Strabane. The line from Strabane, from Victoria Road, Derry, the line to Letterkenny, which crossed into the Irish Free State Lifford, half a mile away from Strabane, the line down to Foyle Valley, which crossed into Donegal at Clady. So everywhere you went in Strabane, except the line to Derry through Tyrone, you were crossing into a different country. The Great Northern was the same. The line went south to Omagh, and that's the line which is sadly missed because it closed in February '65 because William Craig said Derry only to serve one railway. So the orange line or green line. So the line that went through the National Series went, not and the line that went through the Union Series stayed. That was just a coincidence, I'm sure. But Strabane employed over 300 people in the railway. Today there's a massive car park there, Tenny's roundabout, shopping centre. That's where the railway was. You wouldn't know the railway had been in Strabane at all. And that's a great miss. Because Strabane Railway is from 1847 to 1965. Now there's nothing. Okay? Let's look at the Donegal and Strabane. Top left's the goods sheds, the transshipment sheds. Donegal was 3 foot gauge, Greenore was 5 foot 3. You had to tranship the goods. They came from Donegal onto the wagons, heading south many cases to Dublin. Okay? See a border again. And top right, that's Earn, the last of the 464 tanks. Coming around the curve from Lifford. That's Lifford in the distance, and you'll see film footage of Lifford later on today. Bottom left is the international boundary, the bridge over the River Foyle at Lifford to Strabane. That was became the international boundary. On bottom right is one of the Donegal rail cars shutting the goods yard of Strabane. Strabane's so busy, it was open 24/7. Railways open to Belfast, Portadown and Derry 24/7. Passengers during the day, goods trains ran at night except on the Sunday. So, and constant goods traffic, mainly to Donegal because the roads are so poor here. So goods got to Strabane, they're transshipped to Donegal. Okay? And this is the whole impact of partition. The rail car had been heading down to Killybegs, across the border again. I could go on and on and on. Strabane, there's some photographs there, mostly in the book I have, the centre's published. By the way, all funds support the work of the centre, where museum, the author gets nothing. You got the station, huge station, 5 platforms. Okay, top right was that was a rail car you got from Derry to Dublin. First class catering, you get meal, drink. You have tea, you only get a cup of tea. Okay. In the middle, bottom is Phoenix, the legendary shunter. Henry Ford's bought the steam engine. It was a failure in the Cocker Valley. He sold the boiler to the boundary, to the local laundry, and he put a diesel engine in. And he actually made money. Okay? Because he got more money from the laundry that bought the steam boiler that cost to fit the diesel engine. Still survives a Cotra, well worth a visit. And there's a good for Strabane. See the green fence, the platform? That's the customs fence. Because the rail cars arrived from Killybegs or Stranraer. A passengers go through customs because they're in the north now. Okay. When the Donegal shut down as a railway, it still run as a freight business and road bus business for another 12 years until 1971. So you see one of the Donegal containers, top left. You see, bottom left, that's now part of the road in Derry. That's the train coming from Ballymagorry coming to Strabane. Nothing remains of that now, unless there's some embankments on the outskirts of Strabane, that's it. And there's a photograph in the 1930s. Look at all the great fantastic posters there. And Donegal engines and magnet from 1939, because the livery changed in 37. And that's where we're trying to keep alive here, the legacy and the heritage of the Donegal Railway. In our own small way. Building on the bottom left doesn't look like much. It's the first purpose-built customs shed anywhere in Ireland. It's Castle Finn. The first purpose-built customs shed is still there. It was there yesterday anyway. and that was because Clary was the first station of the border, but it was too small a place. So Castle Finn was the main customs post between Strabane and Stranraer. And there's 2 files of trains at Castle Finn. The guys always tend to take photographs because the train stopped over 10 to 15 minutes for a passenger train, half an hour or more for a goods train. So the guys who go to get their photographs. One of the reasons why so few photographs pre-early 50s is because Britain was still under rationing because of World War II. People couldn't afford, couldn't even get permission to travel from Britain. And suddenly we got a lot. The Swilly, there's 12 colour photographs in existence. That's it, 12. Donegal, hundreds. Even this morning I was sent new ones from a supplier in England. There's Castle Finn. Trains entering Castle Finn. The bridge still remains, the station still remains, and that's about it. But that's the very first purpose-built customs post anywhere in Ireland, was Castle Finn. I wonder if the Donegal County Council know that. Okay, so Castle Finn, the goods sheds, the trains were had to get shunt, and they didn't get away in time, the wagons would lie at the next goods train. So they got put in the siding, And that's Blanche, shunting the train. Blanche was one of the last new steam engines built for Donegal Railway, and it's preserved at Donegal at Cultural Museum as well. And the guys are out checking it, because every cruise wagon had to get checked off, what's in here, what's to say on the side. You know, paperwork galore, right? No computers in those days. Lifford. Station building away is still there, Lifford. Down near the council, you know where to look. There's no signs telling you. Lifford. Okay. Bottom left's the bridge, Columkill. Preserves in Derry coming across the bridge from Strabane to Lifford. Collect some wagons probably. Top left is Blanche at the shunting goods wagons that wait in customs clearance. And then top right is rail car 20 heading to Letterkenny at Lifford. Really, roads were terrible in those days. So it really carried everything. You moved house, you used the railway. Farmers getting their equipment, you used the railway. Local industry, you used, the Donegal Dale used the containers for traffic. It's back in the early 1955. Jacobs, biscuits were made in Letterkenny. They put in containers and transshipped the train eventually for Dublin. The Donegal pioneered road transport, rail cars, everything. They were way ahead of their time, but they were starved of finances by the 1950s. Because they were owned by the Greenore, which were going bankrupt, and they're owned by the NCC. So the British own now in half of 100 miles of railway in Donegal. Hello. It's going to happen. And bottom right is a colour photograph showing you, even border bikes being moved across the border. That got customs duty. When they tried to move one of the rail cars, the customs were waiting at Castle Inn for a new Donegal rail car, and told Ford had to pay for the customs duty for it. You didn't know it's a bus, so you got away with it. The legendary Henry Forbes, random things in a shoestring. Wasn't just the Northwest though. The Great Northern Railway crossed the border 17 times. Okay? Pettigo's a good example. Pettigo, the village, it's in the north. But across the river, you were in the Free State. So the station in Pettigo, which is very well preserved by the way, was in the Free State. The village was in the north. You see a problem. And you stopped the cousin crossing the border to go to get the train. And you really went back in the north again until it hit the border again at Ballyshannon. We've got the model here at Pettigo Station. Okay? It's just on display here in the Grey Van Mark, isn't it?
That is,
Yeah. So you'll see the model of that station. The long platforms. Okay? Was the railway that busy? No, to Lough public traffic. The pilgrims went to Lough, went to the railway, to Pettigo. That's why massive platforms. Okay? So there's always a reason for everything. Another example is Ballycastle on the Sligo leading Roman Counties Railway, the last independent railway left in Ireland. Closed in 1957 because the Great Northern was closed. It was a cross-border railway. Ballycastle was in the north. You went quarter mile down the line, you were in the Irish Free State, or the Irish Republic in 1949. And then your twin village, it's like the twin towns, was Black Lion. It's half a mile. It's in County Sligo. Ballycastle is well preserved this day and well worth a visit. So partition impacted everything. I couldn't show you all 17 Great Northern stations, it'd be too many. But the second leader was on Lough Swilly, Crossing Point, was on the County Donegal, border points, Great Northern, border points in the north, and now second leader, Ballycastle, will do 6 railways by the way. Another example is Dundalk. Lovely station, well preserved, one of the best in the Irish rail network. Okay? But it was a line ran from there, the Dundalk, Newry and Greenore Railway. It, like Donegal, was also owned by an English railway, the London North-Western Railway. Okay? And its trains on the left hand side at one of the stations in Dundalk Quay Street. And there's this train there. There's a map of Dundalk, Newry and Greenore Railway. It serves the massive port of Greenore, which in pre-partition was an important shipping town. Now it's nothing. It's a small container point. The Great Northern built a hotel there, like it did in Ballyshannon in Bundoran. Okay, Greenore, there's your hotel, it's tennis courts, everything. It's train around Greenore, you're looking across the river, Carnarvon Lough, okay, towards the north, towards Warren Point, etc. County Down, the mountains of Mourne. And it's an important terminus station. It's a major port, even as a hotel. Partition just killed this traffic off one go. And the whole thing was declined by the late 1930s and ran as an anachronism till it closed down in 1951. So partition had massive impact, not just in this part of Ireland, but across all parts of the border with the north. Okay? And to this day, the most worst off county in Ireland is probably Donegal. In Irish, it's probably Donegal. And the partition didn't help the north either. Didn't help Derry anyway. Okay? There's Newry. There's a border station of Meath. That's now been restored. That's now just been turned into a lovely new greenway between Newry and Greenore and Newry and Carlingford. What was the former railways, now a greenway. You can cycle over it. Carlingford station is now a tourist office. Who knew nothing about railways was down there 3 years ago. Another one was Gorawood. It was the main station between Belfast and Dublin. You go past the train time between Belfast and Dublin, you'd be struggling to even work out where Gorawood was. You take an expert to even point out to you. It was a customs push on the Belfast Dublin line. So the Enterprise, they had 2 drinks cabinets. One you're in the north, basically you want the drinks cabinets. It's stubborn. It's different measures, different costs, different strengths of spirits, etc. Bonkers. And you change the name of Newry. The railway Newry's long gone. Station called Newry's 3 miles away from Newry. It's better something than nothing. And it was a massive interchange for border traffic. There's a rail car. You see the modern rail car on the left. The modern rail car on the right is the rail bus to the Newry branch. Okay. And the GNR apparently rail buses, because they built some of the Donegal rail cars, and they looked after the rolling stock of Donegal. Then the NCC looked after the track and the signalling. That's why it's usually a pretty good nick. Until the NCC became part of the UTA. Those for Tarmac Authority. Now, I was tempted to change this because I just especially 2 years ago. Now this station's closed now too. The wheel's gone full circle. Now it's Belfast Grand Central, but Great Orchard was the first cross-border terminus in Belfast from 1839. And today the Enterprise now runs what calls Grand Central, which is just to the left of what was the Great Victoria Street, built in the old GNR Good Chart. So history's come full circle today. And the Enterprise along last is restored to what's Transit says a city centre location. I dispute that. But I have talked enough today. I've got a little bit of archive film footage, which the guys in Derry in particular have been interested in. We're going to relook at Strabane and Derry from the late 1950s. And here's some actual film archive interviews from people at that time too. So Mark, we're ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then it was over the Mourne, shortly to become the Foyle, and the Lifford Road level crossing into Strabane. This had been a major junction between the 3-foot gauge County Donegal Railway and the Irish standard gauge 5-foot 3 systems until 1959. Now in 1965 it was still a busy freight interchange for Donegal. In 1863 a standard gauge branch from Strabane had linked it with the twin towns of Stranorlar and Ballybuffet, but by 1894 the line had become narrow gauge to allow through running to the remainder of the County Donegal Railway, which at one time extended over 120 miles. This railway opened up to trade remote and sparsely populated areas all over the county and became a tourist attraction in itself.
I think they were very romantic things indeed, especially the little lines that used to run into Donegal in my youth. We thought it was wonderful, the view of the country we used to get traveling. But you never get from a car nowadays.
Closure of the narrow gauge lines deprived Strabane of much of the freight handling and of the tourists who had gloried in the far-flung destinations. The little trains were still here. They had been sold to a Dr. Ralph Cox in the United States for use on a tourist railway there, but he couldn't afford to transport them across the Atlantic. So here they remained, open to the weather, to vandalism, and the scrap merchants in search of brass and copper. One of the factors which worked against this railway also applied to the entire town of Strabane. It was the presence just across the river of the border with the Irish Republic, necessitating customs clearance at Strabane station for many years. This formed a serious barrier to normal trade and travel, especially since the main line also passed into the Republic for the next 3 stations. Trains often solved the problem by not stopping.
Have to come by taxi. There are no trains. The trains doesn't stop there now. I don't know why, unless they say it was the customs. I don't know whether the customs is to blame or not.
An alternative route entirely within Northern Ireland through Donamanna and new buildings had been available until 1954. The snag was that it was narrow gauge, run by the County Donegal Railway, although owned by the UTA. Because of difficulty in running military trains through a neutral country during the war, re-gauging of this line was considered. But the tightness of curves and narrowness of bridges would have made this difficult and expensive. Had it been done, however, it would have improved the rail network. Through running would have been possible to Coleraine and Portrush, and on to Belfast and Lough. Londonderry Victoria Road Station at the waterside end of Craigavon Bridge could have been rebuilt as a central station to serve both main lines into the city. Back in Strabane, the train was preparing for the last stage of the journey. The line here remained in the valley, close to the river, this time on the left bank of the Foyle. Just a short distance north of the station, the bridge marked the border leading to the three County Donegal stations of Porthall, St Johnson, and a few miles further on, Carrigan's. Then it was back into Northern Ireland, past the engine sheds and the extensive sidings alongside the river. The final stage was under the city side of Craigavon Bridge, with its rail wagon link of the lower deck, and into Londonderry Foyle Road, the end of the line.
It's actually a waterside station.
The terminus was ideally sited for passengers to the city centre, and seemed to be perfectly sited for shipping also.
So that little clip gives you a rough idea. What I forgot to say was, the Great Northern went bankrupt in 1958, UTA took over a train service. But when to save money, they stopped on stopping service between Strabane and Derry, except on a Saturday. So St Johnson, Porthall and Carrigan had trains 1 day a week, Saturdays only. And that just killed the traffic completely. Because of customs, because of partition. I've got to say that. So, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
30 minutes.
I'm just going to intervene here very briefly just to say thanks so much to Jim for that really fascinating talk about the kind of striation of the railway network and its effects. The sort of quirky aspects of the border and its effects are always interesting to see and interesting to learn about. And one of the things that I'm kind of increasingly interested in myself is the importance of goods traffic. Actually, it's the kind of maybe the more unglamorous side of the history in some ways, but really important, especially in the kind of early history in terms of how the railways kind of change culture and society and economies in particular. And the other thing that I always think is very interesting is Strabane is just such an interesting case as well, like just to have such a busy station and have that be such a massive part of that economy, and you literally wouldn't know it was there. We did a launch of Jim's Strabane Railways Remembered book back in March there, and I was going around trying to find some of the bits and pieces if there was any. There's usually something left. There's very little left. So now it's good. Exactly.
The right thing to say was the two sewage mark that you see in the film footage. The two sewage. The one facing Derry is Mean Glass, which is very appropriate because Mean Glass is in Foyle Road. Mm-hmm. One facing Donegal is Drumbo, which is outside. So always very appropriate.
And I suppose
you can have that film footage. We'll talk about it. We can send it to you.
Aye.
I suppose now where the railway station was, you've got Asda, which is another kind of marker of cross-border travel in some ways.
Even Paddy Gillespie's place is gone.
That's right. There was a house there that had a few artifacts and stuff. I was looking around for an hour or so. But so, Jim, if you're happy to take a few questions, we'll take a few questions from the audience, and I'll pass over to Mark here, who's going to handle that.
I'll leave that.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks, Mark.
So, any questions?
I have a really stupid question because, everyone in this room will know the answer, but I don't. When you talk about gauges, what does that mean? Sorry.
Well, it's a very good question because, the mainline railway in Ireland is 5'3". Okay, it's 5 in terms of width of the track. That was agreed as far back as 1862 by the Boundary Commission, the Parliamentary Commission. the same money the Donegal Railways built to what's called the narrow gauge. And Ireland became a 3-foot gauge. So that engine outside is built for a 3-foot gauge, okay? The track was 3 foot wide. Because it's built too long gauge, a train will fall off it. It's got to stay on the tracks. So it's not it's a good question, because we talked about Irish narrow gauge. Donegal had 200 miles of narrow gauge railway, okay? And now the only narrow gauge railway left in Donegal is at Oakfield Park. And that's it. But one time, this part around 100 years ago, you got a train from here to Killybegs, Ballyshannon, Derry, okay, Strabane. I got a connection to train to Dublin. Today we've got nothing like that. And this sort of for goods traffic too, because what's the biggest factory here? Where do the goods go? Where they all come in out of here. The tree factory, everything came out of here. Is that clarified things?
It does. So it's basically the width of the track.
Right. So you get trained to Dublin to Belfast, it's 5'3". You get trained to Sligo Dublin, it's 5 foot. That's the gauge to the track. But the same money, we was built in the 3-foot gauge because everything was smaller and therefore cheaper to build. It's like building a small road compared to a motorway. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just add to that a bit more information. So yes, it's the width between the rails. Standard gauge, sort of throughout the world, is known as the width is 4 foot 8.5. So what we have in Ireland as being 5'3" would be classed as broad gauge. So anything that's below 4 foot 8.5 is classed as narrow gauge.
Okay.
So there's a little bit more boring information for you.
I'm sure she don't want it.
Any other questions?
Just let you know, Lily and I, our dad was a station master in Letterkenny.
Yeah.
When the last rail car left Letterkenny and went to Strabane.
There's two, so the Lough Swilly station, there's Donegal, there's two stations.
We were the Donegal,
right.
our dad was the Donegal station master in
There's
Letterkenny.
two stations.
Yeah. And I used to travel to Foyle Royal
Okay.
when I went to secondary school on the rail bus, and we stayed for hockey practice, and I had took a goods train home.
Royal Power School, yeah.
And it would stop at Glenmaquin, and sometimes it didn't stop, and I'd have to, a colleague of mine used to live at this Glenmaquin or wherever it was, and he would jump out of the carriage and I'd throw his hockey stick after him.
I've got photos of Glenmaquin, my Strabane bike, it was colour photograph of Glenmaquin. It's a very hard station to get.
Yeah.
It's still across the way in the centre.
Yeah, there you go.
Anybody else?
You mentioned there Fintown Station. What gauge is that?
Fintown's 3-foot gauge, and the line of Glenties was opened in 1895, and it's Fintown Railway is still there. They were invited today, so unfortunately they'll be running today, and it's the only surviving preserved railway in the north. And most heritage railways in Ireland are closed down for various reasons, like West Clare's gone recently too. So it's only Fintown and Camden are basically open on the 3-foot gauge, and the Waterford to Sure Valley, that's it.
So they're still running, the trains they run
They still run using the original Donegal rail car 18. The only original Donegal steam engine in Donegal is here, Drumbo sitting outside there. There's two more preserved in Derry, Mean Glass and Colmkill, and the one preserved in Kiltraw. But the only one in Donegal is here, Drumbo. One of his trustees, I know it.
I'm very lucky to have a drawing, a coloured drawing that a friend of mine who went to Foyle Royal when I went to school on the rail bus, and this fella drew a coloured picture of the station at Letterkenny, with a train on one side and a rail car on the other side, and the goods yard where we used to travel, and a shot of our house, the back of our house.
But Letterkenny is a good example. Letterkenny had two stations. Today it's now a shopping centre and a bus station.
That's right.
And you hardly know, except the remains of the Donegal station building are the bus station. Then there's a Crane bus nursery. That'll take too long to explain.
The trains in Derry. I've a nephew that's crazy about this stuff, and he came up for the Drumbo train being transported through the north. But when he went up to look at the train in Derry, he kind of went this, and he pointed at something and said, "They're taking the brass off it.
Well, you see,
it seems to be damaged ongoing."
When the stuff in Strabane, they were stripped of everything, and they only survived ironically because of the Troubles. Is the reason why they survived, because during the Troubles, the British Army built a base on this waste ground at Strabane, the former station. So they just became part of a no man's land between the border and the British Army. and the IRA attack, and that's what took part of the bridge. So they survived because there was a short Dumbo. We actually found bullet holes on the engine because it was a no man's land between attacks between during, and luckily we're now in the peace process. Those days are long gone. Thank God for that. I first came to Derry in 1978, and I wouldn't recognise it today. I went to Victoria Road, travelled the rail car in 1978. 77. And Pennyburn works too.
It's kind of unfortunate that things were stripped off them and all that there, but you know something? They're there. And as Jim says, they were preserved. There was nothing left of Lough Swilly. There was one carriage left, so they're there.
You couldn't strip wheels and frame in a hurry. Yeah.
Exactly.
That engine out there is nearly 50 tons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Give you an idea.
I think some of them in the Isle of Man.
There is 2 rail cars.
Two rail cars. Yeah. Actually, we've seen rail car 20 in the presentation. Rail car 1920 in Isle of Man, because it sold in 61. The Isle of Man bought them. The stuff in Strabane bought this American called the Mad Dentist, or Dr. Cox. He bought stuff in Strabane. He built everything for a railway track, everything. But he never came to collect the stuff because he apparently went bankrupt. There's so many articles with that man. I met him twice, and a man of mystery. Okay? And they claimed their own stock, and you hadn't seen it for 20 odd years longer. And so you read a book on the history of the stuff that Strabane on its own. And luckily, it all survived. The only engine that didn't survive was Earn, which went. It's in the booklet. Earn's in the booklet. Earn left the line to Letterkenny and left there. And the Swilly bus went inside the repainted engine. They repainted the engine in green. And then when Letterkenny had been cleared, for the shopping centre in 68, February 68, sources tell me, I've checked the local papers, it was scrapped by mistake. Unfortunately, it sort of didn't survive the Dr. Cox. And this rail car 15 that's next door, it was bought with Dr. Cox too. We don't know where the power unit went to, but we ended up getting the body.
Actual body.
This year's an actual steam coach that was built for the Ballymena and Larne Railway in 1928. It went to the Ballycastle Railway and was bought with Donegal in 1952, coach 58. So this actual coach that became cut in half. One half became a clubhouse, one half went to Fintown. So this was actual steam coach they were actually in. The one behind was built in 1937, rail car 15. So you're sitting in history right here, you're sitting in history.
Anybody else?
That's great.
Could I just say
that
watching Jim's talk and looking at the pictures has brought back an awful lot of memories, because I think I've ridden in all those trains.
Go across and help us and buy a couple of my books. Help support the small museum. Cause
I'll give you a signed copy.
Yeah, because we're a small museum and we're competing with so many other things. Like 10 times more people go to visit the castle in Donegal town than visit here, and that's a great pity.
Yeah.
They all get wheeled into the castle, especially the Americans, and yet nobody comes down here. This is the original station building here too. That's the original station building we're in, next door, the museum.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Are there any plans to reinstate the railways? I haven't a clue what's going on with the state of things, but has there been any movement about getting railways up here?
You're right, but Mark can fill you in the updating that later on. He's in the committee too. I talked enough one day.
Well, we recently had the All Ireland Rail Review, where they looked at putting back railways. And we had our ministers from North and South quite smugly there standing looking at this. So look what we're going to do in the future. And you look at it and you go, you're putting back all the railways you ripped up 60 years ago. And but like governments, they kick the can down the road saying, oh, we're going to do this in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. When it's going to happen, nobody knows. So there is a plan, but we've got to wait on the governments. So,
Maybe forever.
But the thing about railways, railways were first invented for moving freight. That was the big thing for railways.
Stockton, 30 years in England, Stockton and Durham Railway.
Yeah, and moving people then became a secondary thing. And you only have to look, like I grew up in Donegal. I was born after the railways were gone, but you only have to look at the likes of Strabane and Derry. Yes, the Troubles fed into that, but since the railways went, it's become an area of deprivation. You know, the railways brought business. It enabled business to flourish. It enabled transport goods to get out. The railways in its day, the railways were the internet of the day. It allowed people to move around. It allowed people to get their goods out, get goods in. My dad from Donegal, he remembers the railways, and he'd done this interview in RT, and his story was he made his first communion and he got sixpence, and he got the rail car from Inver into Donegal town, and it was the first time he ever seen a banana. So
Wasn't her? That's very nice, her.
yeah, so there we go, guys.
Thank you
I
so
think-
much.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to everybody watching online. I'm going to bring the stream to an end now, and thanks for tuning in.
Now you're going to relax.
I usually do a wee plug at the end, but I think Jim plugged everything at different points there. You'll find but, many of the things that Jim mentioned in